Here, this is a pointer and you're gonna be pointing towards your computer and obviously it has a little thing if you need to
Okay.
use that as well.
Which is the button I want, the,
This one to advance.
okay, excellent. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well? Yeah. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm sorry I came in a little late, so, but I'll get to catch up with everybody later on. So today I want to talk about San Antonio's Cultural Heritage District Program. It's a program that is apart from the landmarks and the historic district programs, but supplements can overlap and was created to give recognition to a different layering that the traditional landmarking and historic districts don't necessarily cover. Feel free to interrupt me whenever you want. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. There we go. So today I'm going to start by defining what is a cultural heritage district. Afterwards, talk about the current 5 current districts we have. Each of them is completely different from each other, and go a bit into their unique histories, cultures, and talk about the most important thing: community. So yeah, I really emphasized it there. Talk about how these districts come to be, or how, at least in the year and a half I've been in San Antonio, have gone through the process with 2 different district nominations. What are our next steps and others, cultural programs that the Office of Historic Preservation manages, and all of these interrelate and dialogue with each other. Okay, so sorry. Cultural heritage recognition is an endorsement of significant sites, structures, objects, businesses, and living heritage elements that contribute to San Antonio's distinctive character and heritage. So this recognizes sites, but the main concept, the main idea is to recognize that intangible component that gives place meaning, and to do this in a community-based manner. What is important to the local communities, and how can we celebrate, recognize it, and protect it to a certain extent? It's an honorific. There is no regulation, no zoning, no overlay change. So no additional taxes, no additional permitting process. Some could say, if you want to go like the kind of mean girl route, it's an honor badge. But on the other hand, it's also a wonderful opportunity for recognition. It's a wonderful opportunity for community stakeholders to market their districts, whether for tourism, whether for commerce, or whether just for familial and cultural pride. So it does entail a 30-day review whenever demolitions come in. However, that's usually not an extra burden for communities, because most of San Antonio has already been, in one way or another, surveyed for historic value. Therefore, that 30-day waiting period is already in play in most of San Antonio, so it doesn't really cause an additional burden to communities at this point. And for one specific district, we kind of just didn't even go into that. So we do use international guiding principles. San Antonio considers itself a very international city due to UNESCO World Heritage Site and being a culinary city in UNESCO. I forget the proper term, they always remind me, but it is also internationally recognized as a city of food at the intangible level, and the site of the missions, of the San Antonio missions. Therefore, the Venice Charter, the Borough Charter, the NARA document, these are all based on the importance of landscape, of intangible culture, of kind of distancing oneself a little bit from the sacredness of the specific brick, but rather on how the community relates to that brick. The San Antonio Declaration kind of takes that back a little bit, and was a response to the NARA document in 1996, where it's like, wait, but we really like our bricks and our stones as well. So it's kind of that negotiation between what is place, what is space, and how that is important to the community. So 5 districts, 5 stories. Each district is completely different from the other. I'm gonna go into a little bit more detail about each of them, but currently we have Jefferson Heights, Old Highway 90, the Hockley Place Cemetery, the Silk Road, and the Pride Cultural Heritage Districts. And here's a map of their locations. They're all completely different shapes, they're all completely different areas, and they represent different communities. What they do have in common is that they were brought to us by their specific local communities, families, friends. Jefferson Heights is the first one that was created in 2005, so it's 20 years old right now. It's the first cultural heritage district, a traditionally working class African American neighborhood on the east side. It was surveyed to become a historic district, but in 2005, there was problems with eligibility due to the many changes that had been done to most of the houses over time. However, the Office of Historic Preservation found that the same communities were living there, the grandchildren of the people who built these houses were living there. The houses had changed a lot over time. There was a lot of infill, so some of them had been knocked down and new buildings had been put into place. But a lot of the grandkids and great grandkids were living there. So it had that intangible component to it, even though it wasn't quite a perfect fit for the rules for historic district in San Antonio at that time. There was another pressure point. I was looking back at documents from 2003, 2004, and the Spurs Stadium was about to be built at that time, right by it. And I was like, there's usually a pressure point. There's usually a reason and an urgency for people to come. And that's like what I'm speculating is that this had something to do with the fact that the neighborhood character was going to change due to a new stadium being built just a couple of blocks away. Old Highway 90, 2018. So there was a pretty big jump in time before the next cultural heritage district was nominated. This is an old highway that connected San Antonio with El Paso in the 19th century. It's probably a much older route. The nomination was brought to the office by small family-owned businesses that were scattered along this. So I tried to, it's not very visible from here. Yeah, here. So a bunch of properties along the highway itself. It was gonna be renamed, that was renamed to the Enrique Barrera Parkway, but people wanted that recognition as Old Highway 90. They didn't want to lose that essence, that presence. So the group of business owners brought it to the Office of Historic Preservation. They did not want their buildings to be landmarks. They really did not want their buildings to become historic landmarks or a historic district. But they did want some recognition. So this was a way to negotiate with the community to have that part of their legacy be recognized without putting an additional permitting overlay on them. So this area does have rich musical heritage. It still has a lot of music shops and other restaurants and other culturally significant shops. It's a very working class area as well. There's also a lot of mechanic shops, and it feels slightly more industrial, but it does have this rich culture around it, and the families and the people brought a bunch of photos. There were a bunch of oral histories. They made a giant barbecue when this was all said and done. The Hockley Place Cemetery 2022 is very different from the others. It's a cemetery. It's an African-American family plot that's tucked away behind the school, right in the middle of a bunch of houses in an urban development. In fact, some of the houses, their yards had encroached on the cemetery. One of the neighbors, a retired Air Force officer, was walking by and was like, hey, there's something there. And he wasn't sure what was there. And other people in the African-American community had said, yeah, there was a cemetery there. I remember they buried someone in the 1970s. And indeed, in fact, in the maps, there was a cemetery there. And that cemetery was the family lot of Jane Warren and her descendants. She was born in 1825 in Alabama, former slave, moved to Texas. She received 57 acres. She had her own cattle brand. She had her cattle, she made her life, her best life here in San Antonio, even with all of the challenges. And she and her descendants were buried in the cemetery. There were no markers left. Things had been broken, had been stolen. There were tiny fragments when landscape architect Everett Fly and the city archaeologist Matt Everson actually went and did scans, underground scans, and were able to find where the bodies were located. A big community cleaning effort was made of all the junk that had been thrown there by years and years of people who didn't know what the space was. The place was cleaned up. And so, yes, you're like, wait, cultural living heritage, what does this have to do with the cemetery? Cemetery is kind of the opposite. The rediscovery and the recognition of the cemetery has brought together the descendants of this family from all over the United States. And they now come to San Antonio once a year. And this space is kept clean by community members. This Oak Road 2024, this is the first nomination that I personally work with, is on the northwest side of San Antonio. And it comprises about 75 different businesses, churches, mosques, and community organizations that represent half of planet Earth, communities from Northern Africa to East Asia and everything in between. Central Africa, Eastern Europe, Western Asia, Persia, Southeast Asia. So we have Vietnamese food there, Northern China, Northern India, Southern India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, even places that are at war right now. So we have countries that have disappeared, countries that are emerging. So when we worked with this landscape, with this area, small part of San Antonio, where we have about 20,000 people that represent the entire planet Earth, we try to distance ourselves from talking about specific nation states and nationality and find what is commonality. So restaurants, food, what brings people together. Talk about language families. So talking about the different Tagalog instead of talking about the Philippines, for example, just because it is such a varied area. This was brought to the city by cultural organization, social organization, refugee serving organizations. And here we avoided a strong district outline, like in Highway 90. The owners wanted to avoid anything that was designation. Most of these buildings are quite new. They're from the 80s, 90s. Well, 80s is already getting in there, right? Yeah. As an 80s child, I'm like, ooh. So, but these are like 80s, 90s, early aughts. So the buildings are newer. This area was developed much more recently. But there is a rich living culture and a lot of interest by community members. The Pride Cultural Heritage District was just enacted in 2025, June 4th. So it's the newest, freshest one. The ribbon cutting was last Friday. This was also brought to the city by community members. Again, each of these districts is so unique from the other. This area, Tobin Hill, has been surveyed for historic properties so many times. It has about 10 landmarks already. It has 2 historic districts already. So we're not too worried again about landmarking specific buildings, but rather about recognizing a community that has been in this area since the 1960s and has that information super well documented. And one of the archivists from UTSA, Melissa Bolke, actually gave us her building survey, her site survey that she had personally been working on for about 15 years. So just reiterating, these are all unique experiences, and any future district nomination that we might get is probably going to be unique from all the other. Every single area, every single story is different. Some of these are newer spaces. Some of them were simply not eligible for traditional landmarking. Others already are chock full of historic districts and landmarks already. So yeah, we just want to make sure we're recognizing them. These are spaces of families, where the intangible components such as food, music, we just wanna make sure we're recognizing and honoring that. These are the things that you can't, well, you can grab food, but you know, you're not gonna grab this exact same dish. It's perishable, right? You're not gonna preserve it forever. It's meant to be consumed. So we're just trying to make sure that we recognize those traditions that can replicate dishes over times and create memories. So again, emphasis, community, community, community. This comes from the community. This comes from community leaders, organizers, from the businesses, from the families. These are community nominated, and I'm gonna explain a little bit more how those come to us. They are community informed. We work with the stakeholders from beginning to end. The stakeholders give us feedback to the very last day and beyond. During the pride ribbon cutting, I had a stakeholder come up to me and say, ooh, there's some corrections that need to happen in the report. And I was thinking, I've already sent you that report like 3 times for those reviews, but yeah, we can still make the changes. You know, we can still be humble and recognize, yes, we're never gonna get it 100% right. This is still, you know, this is still a living document, so sure. We'll make those fixes, we'll make those changes. That's important. This is for you. This comes from you, not from us. So I just wanted to give this example because Ashraf Nahir, the owner of the Alibaba supermarket in the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District. This is kind of the key and the nexus and the heart of the district. It's a supermarket that brings food from half of planet Earth. He has his ear to the ground. Oh, so there's a community from Lithuania moving in. What are their big festivals? Like, what are their moments? Okay, I'm gonna order specialty cookies or chocolates or whatever special food that people eat during their holidays. He does the same thing for all sorts of places, India, the Middle East, and East Asia, and people come here from all over the world before holidays to do special shopping for a lot of food that's very fresh and for a lot of food that comes from very, very far. And I think I like that idea of when people come here, they feel like, wow, you took us back home. Whoever that home might be. We feel like back home. When you grind the coffee, it smells like home. You know, things like this. So they like it. Plus, you know, a lot of times family or people come to shop. They meet their friends they haven't seen in a long time. Sometimes have a customer, they sit, you know, they just stand in a corner and they talk for like half an hour because they haven't seen each other. So I love this quote because it comes to the heart of why we do this work. It's about people, it's about community. And also is in community hands. Some of these things came before us, some of them after us. Celebratory events to commemorate the creation of the district. So Old Highway 90, they made a giant barbecue. And they took oral histories during the barbecue. They had people recording stories that they managed themselves. The Silk Road Cultural Heritage District and Pride Cultural Heritage District both did ribbon cuttings. And they brought in the news, they made media requests. They brought in all the local politicians they can muster. The Silk Road Cultural Heritage District is currently working on doing a farmer's market, starting it up on weekends. They're still figuring and sorting out that this district was enacted in December 2024, so they're still figuring some stuff out. And in fall, they're probably gonna be hosting a festival. We're not quite sure when. This is community led. My office is not working on this, but when they call us and say, hey, can you be present and help us coordinate stuff, we'll go there. But it's really led by them. The Hockley Place Cemetery has a yearly family and public educational event during Dream Week in January. Dream Week is fashioned around Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And there are hundreds of events in San Antonio. One of them is at the Hockley Place Cemetery. They've been doing this for years and they want to keep doing it. And the Pride District had already created a rainbow crosswalk. They had already created banners and they want to continue doing more things in that regard. So the Pride District had already been doing this before being formally recognized, but they want to continue with public art projects and other such So, steps. These come to us to the Office of Historic Preservation through City Council. So the city council members for those districts, for the Pride districts, this was District 1 and District 2. For the Silk Road, it was District 8. And these processes have gone through multiple council members, so the one that gets mostly recognized is the one, who's there when the thing is completed, but really this comes up to city councils through community stakeholders. And after receiving the nomination through city council, I started on January 2nd, 2024, and I was told, hey, can you get both of these done by summer? And I was like, let's see what we can do. They eventually did get done, but I wanted to make sure, more than doing it fast, I wanted to make sure that these were really community informed, and community members were fine with slowing it down as long as their voices got heard in the process. So, reaching out to the stakeholders through the city council, who were the people who brought this in, usually 2 or 3 different stakeholder groups, but then figuring out who else's voice should be involved. So the first few months, in my case, for the 2 most recent districts, it was having lots and lots and lots of conversations over coffee, over Zoom, and just walking around the districts with different people, often getting to know each community stakeholder individually and hearing out their whole stories. Like with anything else, human beings have interhuman politics, interorganizational politics sometimes, especially with the Silk Road, where it was so international, and there's like 3 or 4 wars popping off around the planet. It was very important to make sure I listened to everybody individually before putting everybody together in the same room. Thankfully, most people had like the same goal. Like the goal was, let's recognize this place. It wasn't necessarily just recognize my specific people, so that helped a lot. Yeah, so doing field work, interviews. Our office does oral history interviews. We do have like a sheet, a form. We do store those interviews, but we would actually prefer to work with institutions that can store them better, like universities, Trinity and UTSA, and other local institutions that are better capacitated to store interviews and to then have them open to the public in a more organized fashion. So that was part of the process. And then also doing archival work, reading lots of newspapers, reading lots, going through lots of Sanborns, just doing a lot of archival research and writing, 40, 50-page reports, and then sending them to the community over months at a time. We usually, for the Pride one, there was like a specific deadline, let's get it done, June 2025, that makes sense. So we had a calendar, like how many dates do we need for 2 rounds of feedback, and before that, a 3rd round of feedback, starting internally with the city, then with the stakeholders that have been working on this before we were, and then the general public. And so like giving us 3 months just of back and forth before taking it to the Historic and Design Review Commission, sorry. I put committee, it's commission. The Historic and Design Review Commission. And finally, the community makes their own celebration. They're very excited about this. It has happened. We talked to the district council representatives and the community stakeholders. The city council on both were able to fund most of it. The Office of Historic Preservation was able to get about $5,000 or $6,000. They pick up the $10,000 to make a marker, a local marker for at least one of the sites, and to make banners or street toppers or something else. So that's how at least I've been able to handle the 2 most recent. And yeah, the community gave us so much. This was theirs, this is theirs now, and will continue being theirs. So the community members introduced us to other community members, let us know what the lay of the land was, let us know how to navigate interpersonal politics and how to approach just the general public. We had 3 open community listening sessions for each of these districts. But we had to be sensitive to cultural nuances. When the Silk Road, there are a lot of populations that are currently going through a lot right now. We have 7,000 Afghan refugees that were brought to the United States. San Antonio is a military city, and these were families that held out the military in Afghanistan, and now maybe they're staying in the United States might be over, but these are communities that came here with severe PTSD without knowing the language. And so we just wanted to be sensitive. People don't trust them, like they trust the refugee centers that are helping them. So we had to be very sensitive to the lived experiences of people who have seen things that we never want to see in our lives. So we just want to start wrapping up with, these are some of the other programs that the Scout Estate team. So just a tiny correction, I'm the cultural historian for the city. I work with the Scout Estate team, but I do have a supervisor in the team. Each of us does slightly different work. But our team manages traditional nominations for landmarking district and districting, but we also work with the Legacy Business Program, which recognizes businesses that have been around for 20 years or more. Sometimes if it's restaurants, because restaurants are so hard to manage, administrate 10 years or more. Some of the businesses are 100 or 70 or 80 years old and they're still around. So we want to give them a shout out. The History Here Marker program, which recognizes the small age history sites. The very first one we made was for the Church's Chicken original site in downtown San Antonio. The story map, where if you click on it, people can, it's kind of like Wikipedia, people can input their map and then input a story, input videos, oral histories, newspaper clippings, images. We have done History Here projects with universities, so there is a Green Book project in that. That's a separate layer that you can click on or off just to, pull that layer in specific. There's a missions descendant story for the people who live in the missions. And then there's like the traditional historic landmark program. And here part of what this cultural heritage district helps is now there's a recognition in San Antonio, not just for like the built integrity, but the cultural importance of that site for the local community as a nominating factor, and cultural context statements. We're currently working on wrapping up the African American and Black cultural context statement. It's been a multi-year process, and that's a huge one. And that might be next year's presentation. And all of these we do make recommendations when we write the cultural heritage district nomination. And yeah, next steps, establish we don't have much of an online presence for these districts. There's one page where you can scroll down and click on the reports, and that's it. So we want to make a story map that you can zoom in and explore the different sites and like give a full recognition. We're also working on possibly making a branding kit that has the city logo and stop signage so that people can go to these districts and immediately recognize them on site, maintaining contact with the community liaisons, and supporting recommendations from community members for, say, like, business, right? Or for a landmarking, hey, this is the site where so-and-so lived, and this person is very important to our community, and their story has kind of been gone under the radar. So those are some potential futures. We're currently working on it. We have never had 2 cultural heritage district nominations at the same time. And we are already thinking of the next cultural heritage district that might come to us on the west side. So yeah, you can learn more. This takes you to that one webpage that we're hoping to throw a lot if you want to scan it. And there's one more page, but it's just like kind of a goodbye page. So I'm just gonna, we are on time.
Good. Yeah.
open it up for questions. Yes,
Gloria, this was great. I know you said that the community is coming to council members. What kind of work did the city do to make people aware that the program was going to happen so that they could self-select and approach those council members?
that is such an important question. That did not happen.
Oh,
So people go to a city council asking for a arts district or for a Main Avenue district. In the case of the Silk Road, people were requesting, I think it was on a Main Avenue program. 3 different stakeholder groups had been working with city council for funding, I think at a state level, and that just didn't happen. So city council then we're trying to figure out what's a good fit, and that's kind of how it came to us. And I think something similar happened with Pride, but we're trying to change that and like making this program much more visible as a light touch alternative for communities that the buildings are either very new, but the community's not, or for places where there are like those integrity issues. And now with historic districts much harder to enforce in Texas, this is just an alternative as well. But that's an excellent question. Yes,
How many reports do you also include in the sort of context of each district?
oh yeah, there's like,
Can you repeat the question for me?
yes,
One more.
the question was, in our report, do we include the historic context for each district? Yes, the majority of the report is a history of the area. Yes,
Questions that you included on the oral history interview form?
yes, so yes, can I include some of the questions that I asked in the oral history form? So I haven't, made a, like, so for the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District, Culturingua, community that works with North Africa and Middle Eastern roots, they did their oral histories and gave them to us so that we can draw from them. With the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District, I didn't really interview anybody. I sat with one person to talk about mapping, and they turned it into a beautiful interview that I could not use. But it was questions about places, like, first of all, talk about yourself. That makes things like your story here in San Antonio, like, and then talk about these different places that give meaning over time. So that's kind of how that one conversation was structured. That's a whole other presentation. Let me just say that another thing that I did learn, this is kind of drawing away, but also very important with the Pride Cultural Heritage District. This one conversation I had, which I recorded because I was mapping places of transgender history in San Antonio, that's completely not reported. There was nothing. There were gay and lesbian spaces, but nothing about trans spaces. So I was working with a community member to map places out, and she opened up and said a lot of things that were recorded that were very intense about her lived experience, a very, very difficult, painful lived experience. But then when I come from an academic background, then I realized, oh, we have these sunlight policies, these open glass door policies, these open door policies. I cannot offer her protection. I could make her interview Sunny anonymous, but in the end, it was not an interview. I wasn't able to give her a sign-in sheet. So just pro tip, if you work with local government and you're gonna work with a sensitive group, try to get a university that has better protections for oral histories to do them and post them. We do have like a sheet to like a consent form, but that's not gonna protect them whenever somebody makes a request, an open records request. We have to give them everything we have. We cannot put a hold on it for a few years. That's something that universities, even public universities, can do. So it's not exactly what you were asking, But I just wanted to throw that out there, a learning experience working in public government. But yeah, when I have structured questions, they've been, tell us something about yourself. Let the interviewee lead a bit, so that they're comfortable and open up and move it towards like, hey, talk to me about these specific places as the conversation goes on. Yes,
Yeah, so, you talked a little bit about how, you're trying to do some outreach to the community because it sounds like previously people who are familiar with the city and things like that have both, done more than sort of reaching out. And so, when you have, before you get to develop that, you have ideas for how to inform the community that this is available.
okay, so I'm gonna repeat that question. I hope I get it right. So in the past, community members have come to us with these projects, these proposals, and how can we get the word out there for community members so that they can approach us with their own sites, right? That's also an excellent question. As you saw, like there's only 5 of these districts and they're very recent, most of them. Our office has posted a bunch of different projects that does a bunch of different wonderful things. And we're working on our social media presence a lot. We're working with the CNE Communications and Engagement, the Communications and Engagement Department. They're the ones who have the professional like movie cameras and post like some local news and interview the mayor and like make beautiful edits that then make it into the news. And they've been helping us on our social media game to highlight. So right now, they're working with the Legacy Business Program to highlight that program and make little ads for the different businesses, talking about their history. And hopefully we can do something like that with a bigger online presence with the story maps and with a bigger social media presence for the different districts, celebrating them and saying like, hey, this is a program, visit these districts, nominate your own, so. Yes.
So when you develop these districts, does that open them up to grants or funding, much like a historic district will open them up to these resources?
So the question is, do these districts open them up to grants and funding like a traditional historic district? So the answer is yes and no. It really, on the like basis level, you could say it's a merit badge, it's kind of just a recognition, but on the branding side, and on our end, we're like a very nerdy team. And we're the type of team, like our team, we're 4 people, have been writing grants for a long time. And one of the things we talk with the stakeholders is like, hey, we're gonna send you any grant receipts and we'll help you out editing and writing them as we go along. That's part of our sort of low key, the part that we don't state out loud, but the part of our promise to the communities is continue to work with them. We can't promise them funding, we have no money. But we do work with other community city offices and departments. So yeah, we don't have money, but hey, arts and culture, they have funding for a mural in District 8 and City Council District 8. Let's make sure that the City Council, the community and the Silk Road heritage community, they get a say in and they are in contact so that they can talk about what's most appropriate for that area. So it's kind of more of like a soft and official power, a way to move around. And with the branding, they can say whenever they're applying, hey, we're already part of a district, but we don't have money and we can't guarantee money. And now the landscape is changing very, very quickly in terms of funding. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Gloria, what would you say is the main difference between San Antonio's cultural districts and the cultural districts created by the Texas Commission of the Arts?
Yes, so that's actually a very, very good question. What's the difference between the San Antonio Cultural Heritage District and the district created by the Texas State? The Texas State District is more involved. The community has to have a nonprofit organization. They have to register and they administrated, the community administrated as official capacity in dialogue with the state. It's much more involved. It's some bigger multi-step process. The city one, I think, is a lighter touch at this point, and we have both in the city. So we're happy that we have these different designations.
Now, another question, is this written in the ordinance already in some way? Okay.
So that's a good question. Is this written in the ordinance? No, this is not written in the ordinance. Part of the reason it's such a light touch is there's basically a memo for the Historic and Design Review Commission. It doesn't come from city council and it doesn't have to go to city council. City council made a recognition for the Pride Cultural Heritage District, but I think that was more, but it wasn't an official, they just like made a statement of a recognition, but they didn't have to do any paperwork on their end, and that's part of why it's such a, like, absolutely light touch. No, thank you. Oh, yes.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about, the website musician that is, coming up, or it's coming out?
Yes, so can I talk a bit about the west side? So the west side, of San Antonio is an area that is absolutely culturally rich. It has, very, very involved community organizers and leaders. It has been surveyed for cultural resources and historic resources in the past. It's culturally rich, but it's a very working class community. The community is not interested at all in a historic district, but the leaders are really interested in recognition to protect this mainly Latino community that has been here for many generations from the perils of gentrification and urban development. So we'll see what happens. I've heard from 2 people that there is interest. We'll see what happens. It's still in the air. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria.
Great presentation, and it's, we commend the city of San Antonio that done a 180 in their approach